Hey, welcome back to the Build It Basement. Today we're going to take a quick look at the Chaoticlab's version 2 of their CNC Tap. Now you might be asking yourself why they came out with a version 2, because version 1 was so great, but they did take some improvements that they kind of learned over the course of building the version 1 and the feedback from the customer, and they came out with something that looks even better than the original. So I will say up front and foremost that Chaoticlab did send me this version 2 for free for me to look at, to test, and to try out, and this will be one of a few videos I'm going to be making about this because I don't like to make them too long. But today we're going to specifically look at the version 2 versus the version 1 versus the original Voron Tap, a lot of V's there, and see kind of what the differences are, and maybe see if it's worth an upgrade or if it's not, or maybe you've had issues and this solves them. So let's jump over and take a look at it. So first and foremost, what I want to say here is, packaging's packaging, nothing special here. We'll go through all the differences, but very, very minor. Obviously, a little bit different here with the Voron logo, and this is, I mean, they're boxes, come on. We're not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but there's some minor changes on here, much like there's some minor changes on the inside. So yeah, so first thing I wanna do is just take them both out of the boxes. These are both new. This one I've purchased, I actually have purchased two CNC taps now. And this one, of course, like I said, came for free for me to test, and I'm excited. We're going to go in depth on a video here soon about that. We're going to put it through all of its paces like we did a while back. If you didn't see the video about that, go back. I did do quite a bit of testing with this. So inside the box, you're going to find yourself some version 1, which is still available, by the way, at a slightly discounted price. You're going to find yourself a couple of cool stickers here, your Chaoticlab's logo with the box logo, and you're going to find a little card. And I don't know if these still come with them, but basically they were very worried about the community messing with their apps because, well, let's be honest, this is a pretty precision part. There's a lot that could go wrong, but there's a lot of things that kind of need to be done to make this the best it can be. Now, first thing I will tell you is when you feel this, it is not loose in the sense that the MGN7 that's in here is loose, because it is very, very tight for an MGN7. Matter of fact, most MGN7s are not this tight, but it is loose in the sense that you can tell there's no real, grease lubrication in there. So there's some oil, some packing oil in there. So you are going to want to clean that off, and I'm not going to be doing it in this video, but I did do it in my previous one, so you can take a look at that. So anyways, we have that part in here. We also have a wiring harness that came with it too, and a couple of screws. I'm not going to dig into that too far, so I can put these parts away because, let's face it, they don't really matter that much. And then we're going to get to the version 2, which again comes with the quintessential logo stickers that we all need, right? They're fun to have. And the version 2 tap, which, face value currently, when I'm looking at, not much difference. Actually, I only see one difference right now that we'll look at in a second. But again, a couple screws in there. One thing I will say that I will take out, is it this? Yes. You used to have to print, if you're using an X end stop and you needed to attach that, you had to do a printout to have that end stop, so you have something to trigger that, or else you'd wind up not having the ability to trigger your X end stop. So now, man, some good plastic. What they do is they provide you with, straight out of the package, a method for doing that. So basically you have this right here, and that will attach and allow you to have that X end stop trigger. So that's one upgrade already that we can see, and probably because people complain they had to add something to this bot, which I can understand it being frustrating, especially if you're a first-time builder and you're not knowing what to expect. Now, face value, looking at these from the front, I will tell you that I see 2 screws up here, missing here. Everything else looks relatively the same. Up top, I will tell you that you have your optical switch up here, whereas on this one your optical switch seems to be missing. Where to go? We'll find out. On the back side, if we take a look at these, I can see a couple different things again. I see that they've gone a little bit further with their CNCing to reduce weight, I'm assuming, right here on the back side, where on that one it's still there. They've also gone ahead and they've threaded the aluminum here versus using these nuts on the back of this. They're giving you 2 spare screws right here to use if you well, what are those for? Well, they're spare screws, okay? 3mm spare screws. I believe they're if you're going to use the CAN bus, they allow you to attach this for the CAN bus. I'm pretty sure of that on that. Excuse me. And then obviously we have different optical sensors here. This one being the original, which is 5 volts only, and this one right here, which allows you to use a 24 volt system if you have one with that. So you can use either or when it comes to that. I can also see something that is very, I think, important, and I'm very happy they did. They seem to have gone ahead and inserted a piece of steel. I'm going to do a little zoom in on that one. A piece of steel where the small screws for your linear rail on the back side here actually screws into. There were issues where people were having some problems with these stripping out. Matter of fact, I actually had that issue myself. Excuse me. And I will tell you that my fix to that problem was, after looking at this for a bit, if you have a version 1 and you're having that issue, you will notice that these screws are relatively recessed, meaning that they're not utilizing the full scope of what that hole is and what the threads are in there. So you can put a longer screw in. I don't have that information on me right now. This isn't a video about that. So, but there's only a couple threads catching with it is the way it is, but you can put a longer screw in there and it works out. Just make sure you don't bottom out towards the back here when you do that. So, but back to the version 2 in our comparison. So what they've done this time around is they've gone ahead and it looks like they're using a screw that actually comes back a little bit further, and they're using an insert here to kind of give you a little bit more grip. So that is nice to see. All right, what else do we see? I see the same type of rail. They're both using the MGN7s, the Hiwins, and yeah, not too much difference other than that. All right, so one thing I like to do that sometimes people get really flaky about, and understandably, there's a lot of wording out there, especially with the original. It came with a little card, told you not to disassemble it. What they're really worried about is that linear rail. A Hiwin rail is undoubtedly the most expensive part of this mechanism, this build, and they don't want that to get screwed up. So I'm going to go over the method that I use to clean the rail on the CNC Tap that is as safe as possible, I believe. I don't take it all apart, just take apart what I need to do. I don't use WD-40. They do suggest that. I personally use some isopropyl alcohol, a little bit of air, and then my EP grease. So let's jump right over. I'm going to do that for you. So actually, before I do that, let's weigh the difference. Let's see if these weigh anything different. I almost forgot to do that. So let's grab the scale out real quick here. All right, so this is the version 1, and I'm measuring it at about 61 grams. And the version 2, 60, 64, 65. So slightly heavier, and I'm going to guess that has to do with the additional screws that they gave you here, as well as the inserts here on the back for that rail. And they try to make up some of it with the additional fluting here in the back, but didn't quite get there. But that's still pretty darn light, especially when you compare it to the 100 grams on that printed tap. So now back to what I said. So first things first is you have to realize that there are some small screws on this unit. These back here have O-rings on them. Those are meant to stay even when you install it. They hold the screws in place. When you install it, they crumple up enough they're not going to affect the installation of them, but they are supposed to stay on those screws. The two screws here for your optical sensor, the first thing you're going to want to do if you want to do any disassembly of this part is you're going to want to take these two screws out. Optical sensor comes off because it is much like the Hiwin being probably the most expensive part of this. The optical sensor might be close too, but the optical sensor is probably the part that is also easiest to break that's non-mechanical. So these are 1.3 on the driver for those, as opposed to the 1.5 that you find on the other screws. So we're going to take these two screws out. I get the 1.3. Oh, there it is. And I don't want to lose these screws because I do have a lot of extra screws, but I don't know if I have anything that will fit this. So taking those two out, lift that straight out like that. It's kind of neat. A little tiny optical sensor there on the board. See a little inducer and some chip work there they did to make this viable for multiple voltages. Kudos to them for that. The next thing I'm going to do on this is I'm going to flip it back over. Now we get that removed, and I'm going to grab my 1.5 and I'm going to carefully remove the 4 screws on the front. And I'll explain why this is a little bit more important on this version 2 than it was on the version 1. There was a method to, I would say, partially lubricate the version 1 without taking it apart. Chaoticlab might get upset with me for this, but I didn't necessarily agree with it. What they suggested you did was basically pull it back like this, and that exposes the top of that linear rail on the inside. But that's not really enough place to do much with. I mean, you could jam it with alcohol and jam it with grease, but you're not going to get the grease where you need it on there. So again, I got another video that shows that. So we've taken the 4 screws out of here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to basically be lifting this off like so. Okay, so it's separated. We want to be careful. We do not want to take this Hiwin rail off of its slide. The carriage needs to stay on there. We don't want to lose the balls, and I can already tell, and this is kind of a good sign, and this goes for pretty much every linear rail that you have out there. Now, it may seem in your mind that a rail that slides easy is a really good rail, right? Because it's moving really well, it's really smooth, right? But the thing is that there's supposed to be a load on these rails, and without pressure from all directions from the ball bearings in their grooves, this will never ever be a high tolerance piece. It will be as high as it can be, but it's meant to have some grease in there, and it's meant to have a little bit of drag because of that grease. It's going to stop it from going linearly the other direction, you know, left to right as opposed to up and down. So what I like to do is, now that we can kind of get to the underside of this right here, and I can expose it if I wanted to, about as much as I did on the other one. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself a paper towel, and I'm going to get myself some isopropyl alcohol. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. Boop. All right. And what I like to do is spray directly in, kind of saturate it right in there, and then work it a little bit. And I don't want to go much beyond the ends of that rail. I want to get that alcohol working there, and I can already kind of feel it a little bit. I do not expect to see much coming out of this rail. Like I said, this is a high quality Hiwin rail, some of the highest quality rails that you'll find, and because of that reason, they do come relatively clean from the factory when they're manufactured. So I don't expect to see much there. I am still doing this because it's important, it really is. And we're using a 97 isopropyl alcohol. It will dry better, quicker, faster, nicer, less water. You don't really want much water when you're dealing with rails anyways. But yeah, we're going to work that back and forth a little bit more. I'm just going to wipe stuff down a little bit. And we lost a screw, but we'll just set that aside for now. Give one more pressure wash right in there. One more back and forth moment. Then I'm going to take compressed air. And I'm not going to jam it with compressed air. I'm just going to lightly, I gotta open this up first. I'm going to lightly use it. I'm going to puff it. You really should never just jam air into something, because when you're using compressed air, that will cool off the can too quick and you lose your pressure. But I don't want to go too hard on this. I want to more or less just kind of help it dry out, maybe push anything that's in there out of there. Because the next step is I don't really want it to have much alcohol in it, on it, when I go to lubricate it. Because alcohol will break down the grease. All right, we're going to let that sit for a second, and while that is sitting, drying out, we're going to take a quick look at the Chaoticlab's website and kind of look at what they got going on over here real quick. So I'm on the Chaoticlab's website right now, and again, they still have the Voron 1 available. It's on sale right now as of this taping for about $45.99. It's also available on Amazon if you want to get there. Now, they're charging $4 whole more for the version 2, which is a hell of a bargain. You're getting the upgrade, quite a few upgrades on there. We'll get into the magnets in a second, but that wasn't really exposed until we opened it up. Let's see here, what are they saying? So Featherlight, thanks to the Bad Noob. So those of you who don't know who Bad Noob is, he's one of the main we'll say engineers in the Voron team. He works on a lot of their products and things like that. And it looks like Bad Noob was actually part of this. So a lot of people talk about the fact that this came out of nowheres and really doesn't have anything to do with anything else. But it was embraced by the Voron team. They actually worked a little bit with Chaoticlabs and looked at their products. Steve Builds, if you're not familiar, also used one of these. But anyways, they're talking about this for a year. Steel inserts, more stability. I would say steel inserts for better use and less chance of those stripping out. They're telling you here it's a Hiwin rail. It's one of the major reasons between these CNC taps and the original printed tap as to why it weighs so much less. They're telling you right here, the other one with the MGN 9, which was used because of the limits they wanted on that. But they're getting the performance out of an MGN 7. I believe, and I don't know if it says it here, but they did some special work with Hiwin to get that rail just the way they want it. I'm going to skip over these input shaper data because I'm not a huge fan of it. My input shaper looks better than this. So this is beta user thing that they had. So Omron part. So if you know who Omron is, a lot of the SSRs that we use in our printers are manufactured by them. They also do inductive probes and things like that. So Omron's a very well liked company as well. Featherlight, they're talking about how light it is versus other CNC taps, because there are other manufacturers that are making aluminum based CNC taps. And 65, that was dead on the money, so I guess my scale works, right? I was slightly less than that, but and right here they're talking about the tap version 2 versus it looks like a mount there for an inductive unit for the rail, but that's a little bit different. And what are they saying here? Access screws for mounting that, the straightforward installation. So here again, they're talking about this bracket they added to the side of the unit for your X contact, for your end stop on that to help you out. Oh, here's one. Wasn't even aware of this one yet. Trigger light indicator. So triggered with red and open with blue. The current version 1 triggers with blue and is nothing when it's not triggered. So that will actually be a little bit helpful if you think things aren't working the way they should. Let's see, and once again, a 524 volt on there, and high compatibility with the Moron 2.4 R2 Trident. Basically, if you're doing an MGN 12 rail, linear rail on your X axis, you can use this. So that means you could use this on a 2.4 non-R2 if you're using the MGN 12 version of that, because there were multiple versions where they went with the original had 2 9s, then they went with a single 9, then they went with a 12. So I'm not going to go into all these extra stuff, but they do make a lot of other parts too. Some of these other parts are going to be on another build I'm doing, such as these toolless Z-axis tensioners. But yeah, some cool stuff there. Give that another second or two to dry out, and this does come with a full manual available to it. It's right on their GitHub, so feel free to take a look at that. Lots of great information in here, telling you about all the parts, saying what size everything is, so if you need to buy replacement parts or if you lose something, you have it. One thing a lot of people had trouble with was the belting of this unit. I will tell you personally, and when I tell you this, I want a full screen of me. I find it near impossible. Personally, I find it near impossible to install this and get the belts the way they need to get through this thing without taking the front plate off. So that's another time you want to be really careful with that linear rail, that Hiwin rail on the inside, is if you're having trouble getting the belts through this and you take this off, make sure you do something so that that does not slide off all the way, because you'll lose some balls. Yeah. All right. Let's go over. Let's see where we're at here. This should be pretty close to dry. See if I see any signs of isopropyl alcohol still on there, and I look pretty good. All right. So next step I like to use is some Mobilux EP grease, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this about halfway off of the rail, leaving it in place and making sure I don't twist it at all when I do this. But this will allow me to put a bead of grease on both sides here, right where our ball bearings are. If I can get my and I put it on the back plane, and most of it's going to get pushed right out. That's fine. And it's going to work it a little bit. That's going to basically lube a lot of those guys right up. And I'm going to do that a second pass. This time we'll do a close-up. Why not, right? So as you see, I have those exposed. And I'm going to barely touch anything. Put a nice big dab in there, and then put a nice big dab over here. And then again, a lot of it's going to get pushed out, which is fine. Don't worry about it. Clean up after yourself too. You don't want all that grease just floating around. Or maybe you do, I don't know. And then let's go ahead and let's work this. And I can already tell you, I can feel some drag, and that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. So now I'm going to do it off the outside. Now on the outside, it's a little bit more difficult because this comes up a little bit. So I'm actually going to go through this hole that's right below the kind of the optical sensor blocker, and I'm going to work my way very carefully down to the bottom and put some grease on that side and put some grease on the other side, and then again clean it up. And honestly, that should be enough. It's still really nice though. It's moving really well. Let me try to pack a little bit more in there. What I will say about grease is you can never have too much as long as you clean up after yourself. Okay. That's very nice. Yep. So what I'm going to suggest when you install this, which we're going to do in another video here pretty shortly, take a look out for that one, is you're going to want to do something to hold that. And I'm going to suggest using a small magnet on the bottom. And that's what I'll do when I do the video, when you see the video, is it'll be a small magnet I'm going to put right there to make sure that this linear rail doesn't slide off. That way you can work your belts in there and you have something holding it in place. All right, so reassembly of this, pretty easy as well. Let's take this, set that back. Let's go back to the wider camera and clean off our fingers a little bit. So we lost the screw during the process, but we will put that right back in. And the little O-ring that also holds that. All the while being careful with that Hiwin rail. And again, they just want you to be careful. And they just want you to be careful with it. It's a precision part, right? And this might be the hardest part of this whole thing, is getting this little washer, this little O-ring back on the screw. There we go. All right, so now that we did that, let's look at these magnets. Now I'm not going to disassemble this and show it to you because I really don't want to take the time to do it in this video. To be honest. But the way that this unit worked is there's a magnet. Let me go close up on this. There's a magnet up here that basically, and I thought this was ingenious when I saw it. There's a magnet up here that basically uses the actual rail segment, not the carriage, but the rail, and that's what kind of clamps it up. Is that the way that works like that, which is really neat. It's a little dark, but you can kind of see it. Hard to show that. There we go. So that was kind of neat. Now, on the new one, they've gone back, I won't say back to basics, but they've gone back to almost more of a classic design where they have, and I don't know where they got these, but they have two angled pieces. These are steel. They feel slightly magnetized, but I think that's because they've been on the magnets. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, they're slightly magnetized. They're in there, and they have screws on to hold them, just like you would in a regular Voron tap. And then they have these two magnets right here, very strong neodymium magnets. Those guys are tiny, and they're, I mean, really tiny. And those are super strong. One of them is more than enough to hold that up. So more of a classic feel there as to how they're doing it versus how they were doing it. So this is more in line with what the original Voron was like. So we're going to do this, and we're going to basically align as close as possible our linear rail like that. And then what we got to make sure we do is this little peg that's in here needs to be inside this window, and this should be moving freely, which it does. Okay, so now that we have that back together, we're going to go ahead and put the screws back in here. This is the 1.5, and just out of an abundance of caution and respect for the parts, we're going to make sure that we align our screws properly, and I'm just going to barely finger tighten the first one. I'm going to crisscross this. I'm going to go to the second one. I'm going to crisscross back, This is just to make sure that we maintain the fact that we're putting in there equally across the board. You know what? It's really amazing that no matter where this part is made, that it's able to be made for such a low price. I'm just gonna go back and tighten that. We live in a great time and age when this stuff happens. It happens quick too, you know? All right, so we now have this back together. It's working just fine. Now the last part to put back on here is our optical sensor. So that's gonna go back on like so. And these are gonna use the 1.3 screw heads. And again, I'm just going to finger tighten that. Not that tight at all, just enough. And then I'll come back. And just realize these screws are small. You know, you don't want to gorilla them in. You just want to be tight. There's not a lot of mass there you need to hold in place. So there you go. She's prepped and ready to use. Could be fun, right? All right, so it's prepped, it's ready to use. Next video we're gonna have on this small series about this new Chaoticlab version 2, CNC Chaoticlab version 2. Those words, however you want to put them, is actually installing it on the machine. We'll see how that goes, and then we'll compare it to what we had before. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it educational or fun or something. And if this is the first video you've seen from me, I do appreciate you watching, staying around, and maybe you'll stick around long enough to catch some other videos. So go ahead and check the library of videos I have. I have multiple Voron builds. I have multiple videos about a bunch of stuff, and new content is always coming down the pike. It's been a little bit low lately, but a lot of stuff going on. So I will check you later, and see you soon.